way, you know, back to 1936 when I was born. But what happened, you know, I was a kid of 11 years old in Roswell, New Mexico, and my dad was the Air Force intelligence officer for the 509th Bomb Group. And I guess something crashed on a ranch outside of Roswell, about 75 miles northwest of Roswell, on the Foster Ranch. And the base commander, Colonel Blanchard, dispatched my dad and a CIC agent, Sheridan Cabot, out there to see what crashed, because they didn't know whether it was a civilian airplane or a military airplane or whatever, but they knew something happened on this ranch because the rancher found some debris that looked very strange to him. But as it turns out, my dad picked up the representative portions of the debris, and since he realized this was very unusual, he wanted myself and my mother to see this. So he swung by our house in Roswell to show it to us, even though it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. And so he got me and my mom up, and we looked at all this metal debris and realized that this is not the usual. This is not from an airplane or any kind of thing that we had ever built, I think. And so I examined it and looked at it, and I agreed this is something I'd probably never see again. And that's how I got started.
Yes, sir. So what exactly did your father do in the Air Force?
Well, he was the intelligence officer for the 509th Bomb Group. And as you know, the 509th was a bomb group that dropped the 2 atomic bombs on Japan. And he was the intelligence officer, so he was right in the middle of that event also. And he had gone to Air Force Intelligence School, was on the staff of the Army Air Force Intelligence School, and he had a lot of training to back up what he was saying. And that's where they started.
Did your father see or ever mention of any bodies recovered from the crash?
No, he specifically mentioned that he did not see the bodies, but he intimated that he knew people who did see them. So I have no doubt that they were there.
Yeah, and you hear a bunch of stories and a lot of other people saying that your father did see bodies and from the crash, but I don't know why people are saying that, because it doesn't come from the horse's mouth, you know.
Yeah.
But did your father ever say like where the debris went to? Like, did it go to Wright-Patterson or did it go to some other secret Air Force base?
Well, you know, Colonel Blanchard, after seeing what was recovered on that ranch, sent my dad to the Army Air Force in Fort Worth, you know, to see General Ramey, who was the 8th Air Force commander. So they flew this debris under armed guard in a B-29 to show General Ramey what they had found. And so my understanding is after Ramey saw this, he dispatched it to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio.
Yeah. Huh. Stanton Freeman a couple specials, I believe, on Discovery Channel about Wright-Patterson, I believe.
Yeah.
But speaking of Stanton, I'm going to have him at the end of the month, and I mentioned you to him, and he said, you two go way back, and you're old friends, and he told me to tell you, hey, so.
Yeah, a long time. Yeah, just a lot of history has passed by since I've known Stan. He was a good friend of the family. You know, he was actually the first one to interview my dad and break the story.
Like my next question, but what year did Stan come interview your dad? I
believe it was 1978. He had been on a speaking engagement there in Baton Rouge about UFOs, and one of the people in the audience was a radio station manager that my dad had talked to on ham radio, intimating that there was a crash of a UFO, a flying saucer on this ranch. So this radio person told Stan that he needs to interview my dad about this too. So that's where Stanton got the first word about my dad being on the inside of a retrieval of a flying saucer. So he went down to Houma, Louisiana, and interviewed my dad, and it just started from there.
Did your father ever receive I don't know how to say it. Did people ever come to y'all's house, like people like Men in Black or any other kind of secret government agency?
No, not to my knowledge. The only thing my dad said is, when he came back from Fort Worth, he sat my mom and myself down and said we were never to talk about this again, just treat it like it didn't happen. And that's where it remained for years.
Yeah, because you hear a lot of people say, I don't know necessarily if I have a opinion about the Men in Black, but a lot of people say the Men in Black always want to, it's just some see that try to cover up stuff exactly like the Rock incident and just try to keep it on a low key. But what in your opinion would be the primary reason to cover up the UFO crash?
Good question. I don't know. Of course, we had just finished World War II, and the Cold War with the Soviet Union was ramping up. So they may have based their need for secrecy on that fact itself. But right now, there's no reason to keep this a secret. It should be released and let people know exactly what happened out there, and other crash retrievals too.
Yes, sir. Did your father ever mention anything like what he believed the crash was?
Well, the only words he uttered, when we were in the kitchen that night looking at this, and he said he told me to look at this very carefully because he felt this is parts of what he called a flying saucer, that it probably was not of human manufacture, but came from elsewhere. And that's, and looking at the debris myself, I can understand why he said that, because it's just was strange material. Another interesting aspect of that trip to Fort Worth was, they had a picture of my dad holding some debris in General Ramey's office, but what he was holding was parts of a radar target and not what we saw on that kitchen floor. So they'd switched the debris for the photography.
Yeah, that's one of the questions I had. Is this picture that your father is well known for when he's kneeling down in General Ramey's office? Is that the material in the photo? That's not part of the crash?
No.
That was just a cover-up piece, right?
I'm sorry.
That was just a cover-up.
Oh yeah, that was a cover-up, and so they felt the need for secrecy was high on the priority list. So they managed to fake the photographs. Demonstrating what was obviously a radar target. There was even a balloon envelope in the background to cement the story. There was just a weather balloon or something like that had crashed. But I guarantee you that's not what he brought home that night. The debris had been switched to something far more mundane, like a radar target. And it made my dad look like a fool, because if you look at his face in that photograph, he looks like you got to be kidding me. This is not what I brought here.
Yeah, exactly.
But he went along with the cover-up, though.
It's always been a lot of rumors that what your father was holding was a memory medal. Explain what the memory medal is. I'm
sorry?
Explain what the memory medal was.
Well, when I looked at the debris, there was a lot of foil-like material, almost like an aluminum kitchen wrap today. But I did not try to bend it or tear it or stress it. But my dad did describe the fact that if you folded it, it would unfold. I did not see that myself, but my dad reiterated the story that this is a very strange material, almost like a mylar today.
Yes, sir. Was there any other type of hieroglyphics or any other type of material written down upon the object?
Well, the strangest part of this was the little beam-like members that they were metallic, and they had some strange writing along the inside surface, which I at first thought this was Egyptian hieroglyphics, but it wasn't that. It was, like geometric symbols and figures of various configurations imprinted along the inside surface. And the color was like a violet-purple hue, which was semi-reflective of light. So that was the strangest thing, was seeing that writing.
before the whole Roswell incident, did your father ever believe in the possibility of extraterrestrials visiting Earth?
You know, the story never came out. You know, he never made one mention about extraterrestrial life or crash saucers and so forth until it really happened. So before that, he was just like anybody else, you know, about feelings of how we're not alone. But that cemented the fact that we're not alone, and that whoever these people are, and I say people loosely, they're obviously smarter than we are because they can get here from wherever they come from, and I'd dearly like to know where they came from.
Yeah. Well, what, in your opinion, like before during that whole time, was there a bunch of did you get a bunch of ridicule and from your friends and from your school? Because I know if that would happen nowadays, you would get so much ridicule. If that would have happened to me, I would get bashed at, ridiculed, laughed at, and it would just be crazy. Because, like, was it easier then than now? You
I'm sorry. Any ridicule? No. You know, the story was killed. You know, the next day the Roswell paper printed a retraction on the story, so it never came up. And since I was ordered by my dad never to mention this, you know, my friends never knew about this.
Back to to July 1947. The night your father got this material or saw this debris, was it late at night or was it the next day?
Well, you know, I'm not sure of the timing on this. I do know that when he came by the house, I'd been asleep for hours, so it must have been in the wee hours of the morning when he dropped by. But even though it was early in the morning, he felt this was important enough to wake us up and look at this.
Yes, sir.
And I agree. So,
did he ever mention of any other kind of agency, like maybe I don't know, look, maybe CIA or any other kind of CIA wouldn't even. I think CIA was just in the beginnings of their own. I think they weren't formed until 1947. So, but was there any other kind of agency that visited?
Well, you know, the Sheridan Cabot that went out there with him was a CIC agent, which was a forerunner of the CIA. So, yeah, they were involved.
Like, did you ever hear any questions, like, or interrogations that people gave to your father?
You know, not really, because, again, the subject was verboten to even bring up, even in the household. So, no, I didn't, was not on the inside of that.
Through all the years that I've been listening to you, you know, on other shows and stuff, and Stanton Friedman and others, I never really heard anything about anybody else in your family. Like, let's say maybe your mother. Like, what did she think about the whole situation?
Well, she was a typical housewife in the 1940s. You know, she was more, you know, worried about take care of the house, you know, fixing meals, so forth like that. So really, you know, she and my dad might have had some conversation that I'm not privy to, but she never really said very much about this because, again, we were told not to talk about it.
Yeah, and I'm sure, you know, my mother would have told me to shut up and don't talk about it.
Yeah, really.
Especially now, because it's just I don't know why, but the whole UFO thing, it still gets ridiculed, and you know, like, there are UFOs out there. Are they extraterrestrial or are they government? The point is, it doesn't matter. They're real, you know, and they're out there. But are there extraterrestrials? We know there's other life out there, but you know, I don't think we need to get ridiculed just because of a story or for even because if we have scientific evidence or proof. As much evidence and proof that your father had, and his word and other people's words too about the incident and the crash, that would hold up in court any day you know, because all it takes is a few witnesses. But
yeah.
but for someone on, because it was a UFO crash, you know, it's different. I don't understand why does it have to be different, you know? Because I guess because the government's involved, you know. So tell me, like, did your father ever think about bringing this to court, or did anybody like Stanton Friedman or anybody else try to say, like, you might need to try to bring this case to court and try to get it known?
No, you know, because we were really just observers and not investigators like Stanton Friedman. But he was a good soldier. He was following orders, and his orders passed down to me too and my mom. So he never brought the subject up until maybe Stanton started to interview him.
Yeah, I'm in the Army Reserves myself, and I just had drill this past weekend.
Yeah.
That's one reason why I said I had to, because the first interview that I was going to do with you was going to be Saturday, March 13th, and that they switched. My drill was supposed to be scheduled the first weekend. Yeah, it's supposed to be scheduled the first weekend in March, but they rescheduled it on me. But tell me your views about possibility of Earth being visited by extraterrestrials. Like, is it possible?
Oh yeah, well, it's 100% for me because I saw the fruits of that. So, you know, oh yeah, and you know, with the Hubble telescope and other telescopes, the Kepler, they're beginning to find multitudes of planets out there.
Yes, they
so
are.
far, they have not found Earth-like planets yet, but they've come very close. And there's, you know, it's just a matter of time before they find Earth-like planets, and that would really cement the fact that we're not alone.
A lot of people say that there hasn't been much going on since I don't know, I would say maybe the 70s or 80s up to now, because, you know, you had the Aurora in 1897, you have the UFO in, I believe it was Los Angeles, I think it was 1942 or 43, the air raid.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people say that could have been Japan, though, but then you have the Roswell incident, and you have Kecksburg in the 60s or 70s. Then you have the Henderson Forest in 1980, and but there really hasn't been much recently. The only most recent thing is Phoenix Lights. Do they, whatever they are, like ET or government, do they still have interest in us, or
oh yeah,
or are they done with us? Like, because if it's government or not, like, there's something going on, you know, like, because there's just not much going on. Like, how come there hasn't been quite as many outstanding cases as there used to be?
Well, I think, you know, it comes in waves, it seems like. You know, some years you have a lot of sightings, other years, you know, you don't. So I think that indicates their varying interest, because I do believe that these probes, or whatever they are information gathering devices. Like, you know, we're sending out probes to Mars and Venus and elsewhere, just to investigate our own solar system. So these people are far in advance of us, so they're obviously interested in other civilizations like ours, especially since we're in a nuclear age, and, you know, they're probably wondering, are we going to survive that? So, yeah, they have a lot of interest in us.
Is it possible that this UFO could have been, the UFO in Roswell, the UFO could have been secret Nazi technology that we or the Soviet Union recovered after World War II?
Well, you know, they have thought of all possibilities. And from what I saw, this did not look like any kind of material that would be commonplace on Earth. And I think that, you know, the material itself and the language or the writing on it would indicate that it came from someplace else. Yeah.
It wouldn't just make sense. A lot of people say that was just a cover-up, just that they had their own, I don't know how to say it, binary code or whatever. If it was either ET or government, you know, but I don't understand why the government would do that, because might as well,
you know.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, you know the Foo Fighters, that the Allied bombers ran across there in Europe during the war there. and these were strange lights that tracked our aircraft, and didn't do anything to them. But we were concerned that this might be a Nazi secret weapon.
Yeah.
And the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, also saw these fighters too, and they were thinking that they belonged to us. So, but it has turned out they didn't belong to either us or the Luftwaffe or Germans.
Let me see. Like, do you think that? Okay, I'm talking about not now. I'm talking about back then. Do you think that do you or did your father think that the U.S. or the Soviet Union had better aircraft technology? Like, who had the better Air Force? Was it us or was it the Soviet Union?
Well, I think no question about that. It was ours. We had the B-29, the Super Fortresses, and so no, I think we were light years ahead of the Soviet Union. Or the Germans were close though.
Yeah. With
some of their aircraft.
When did the Soviet Union get their MiGs?
Well, they must be in the 50s. For the Korean War, we know that our F-86 fighters were always in combat with Soviet MiGs. So they must have come out in the 50s.
Yeah, a lot of people say that the MiGs came from, they could have possibly been part, because, people say that Russia had their own UFO crash, or several UFO crashes, just like Roswell. And some say, of course, Roswell could have been either German or it could have been Russian. But I think it could have been just like, it could have been out of this world. I don't think it was possibly here. But I just don't understand, like how come right after the war, it seems like there's just all this. It was during the war too, and a little bit before the war, but specifically after the war, there's just this so much burst in technology, and it seems like right after the war, there were several UFO crashes, and it's just everybody's technology started getting better. Like, why is that?
Well, this is a worldwide phenomenon. It's not just the United States involved, obviously.
Yeah.
And it could be that there's some reverse engineering going on here where they could gain knowledge from examining these craft, and I think that may be part of it. But you have to understand that it takes a certain amount of technology to even reverse engineer something like that. Like you couldn't give a digital wristwatch to Da Vinci and have him reproduce it. It couldn't be done because of the lack of technology. So, but I think we're learning as we go, and that may be one reason they're keeping this a highly secret event.
Do you believe our government is working side by side with extraterrestrials? It's also known as the Serpo Project. Do you think think that's possible?
I don't know. Perhaps so. I guess anything is possible. I'd be a skeptic there, but I'm not neither here nor there on this thing because the possibility is there.
Yeah. Other than memory metal from the crash, like what other? Well, I probably need to back it up. I forgot his name. Was it Colonel Corso?
Yeah, Colonel Corso. He wrote a book.
The Roswell incident, or the day after Roswell?
Yeah, the day after Roswell. And, he wrote about the fact that we were reverse engineering these craft and getting information for our own aircraft design. And, again, the possibility is there. He's where he could have been in on the inside of this thing, so it's a very interesting event.
If your father was late to go to the crash field, or was he early, or what?
Well, Bill Brazel, Mr. Brazel, who was the ranch foreman, found this debris on his field in one of his sheep fields, so he notified the sheriff at Chavez County, who then secondarily notified Colonel Blanchard. So the debris might have been out there for a little time before Mac Brazel found it. But that's, I just brought it in, and that's where it started.
Yeah. It's just I want to believe the Colonel Corso. I don't disagree with him because I can't disprove him. You can't disprove anybody because that's his account. But the thing is, what I don't understand is that your father was there, but how come Colonel Corso? How did he get a hold of all this stuff that your father didn't get to see?
Well, that I'm not sure about because I was not on the inside of that.
Yeah.
But all I do know is what I saw and what my dad saw. But obviously the debris, the metal, or the remnants of this craft was spread around to different scientific organizations to help reverse engineer it.
Well, obviously, I'm kind of skipping around here, but obviously the crash wasn't a weather balloon.
No, definitely not.
Just to let people know who are new to this subject, all the listeners out there, explain, because I'm sure they're going to probably Google, the Roswell incident or the Roswell UFO crash. I'm sure most people have heard, but probably some haven't. You never know, especially a lot of young people. But explain why it could not have been a weather balloon.
Well, we're talking about something totally different. A weather balloon consisted of a radiosonde transmitter to transmit information back to the base. There's obviously balloon envelopes, neoprene balloon envelopes, and a lot of foil because of the radar target, the reflectors. But this was not that. It just wasn't there. But that's the cover-up, and it's stuck over the years. But I think sooner or later they're going to have to really come out and fess up what this really was. And as it turns out, other governments began to release this information too. So there's been a slow release of information about the reality of extraterrestrial visitations.
Yeah. What did your father believe about? What did it just make him laugh when he heard the story about the balloon story? Well,
yeah, I was no longer at home at that time. I was in the Navy and then later the Army myself. And so I don't know what he thought about that because we never really discussed this. The only thing I talked about to my dad was, they sent a bunch of soldiers out there to collect the debris to really clean it up. And I talked with him in 1984, 85, and he had just gotten back from the field in Roswell at the behest of one of the TV stations in New Orleans. And I asked him jokingly, was there any debris left out there? And he said, oh, no, they vacuumed the debris up. That was his exact words. They vacuumed it up. So they wanted to make sure that this did not fall in civilian hands.
Is it possible that your father could have, well, did he have any security clearance? Or
oh, yeah.
Well, of course, you had to have, of course, with his rank, he has to have the security clearance, but was it enough to be able to try to hide anything or to get on the inside and try to find out? Because, of course, if he found out anything, that it could, because if it was technology that we received from extraterrestrial, we don't want our enemies to find out what that is. Is it possible that he could have been on the inside to find out what it was?
It's possible, but, he never really discussed his job. I just knew him as the intelligence officer, and that, of course, implies that he had a very high security clearance because, they're dealing with nuclear weapons. So, I'm not sure whether he was in on the inside of investigating this. I kind of don't think so, because I think what happened is when he brought the debris to General Ramey's office, that was the end of the story as far as we're concerned, because General Ramey took over at that point and started the cover-up.
Yeah, and because even to the naysayers out there that say that your father may have helped cover it up, even though if he did, even though if your father was on the inside a little bit and knew what this stuff was, it is for national security reasons, because if this was really extraterrestrial, do we want it to be in the hands of the wrong hands,
Well, you kind of have to realize that this was not just a crash in the United States, but the Soviet Union and Russia had the same stuff. So they're investigating this too.
That's why I mentioned the MiGs, because it seems like the early and the mid part of the 20th century, there were just several crashes, and it just seems like there's just this burst of technology, coming out, and it's just remarkable. But and some say, that could have been what the Cold War is about, was just technology from, like, my UFO crash or my UFO recovery is better than your UFO recovery, and there's just trying to prove that who has the best technology. And but I don't know about that, but you just hear stories about that too. But do you think we're getting closer to UFO disclosure?
I would hope so, because before I die, I would like to have the beans spilled on this thing so I could tell people, see, I told you so. But even if they don't, I know what it was. So that's neither here nor there.
Have you ever been to Washington, D.C. with Stephen Bassett?
Yes, I have.
Explain that a little bit.
Well, it's about the Disclosure Project, and he's in on the investigation of this. I'm just an observer myself. I don't investigate this, but he's in on the sifting through the knowledge that's being gleaned from this, and hopefully it will lead to a disclosure of what's happening.
How about Stephen Greer?
The same, he's an investigator.
Same thing? Yeah. Is Stephen Greer and Stephen Bassett working side by side, like trying to get disclosure together, or are they just kind of, they're on the same team but just going towards a different direction? Yeah,
I don't know. I guess they may be working, sharing information, but I'm not on the inside to know about that.
Yeah. 2012 is coming up pretty soon. Do you think that we will receive more UFO sightings and unexplained phenomena the closer 2012 gets?
Yeah, I'm a total agnostic and skeptic when it comes to this 2012 business. So I tend to put that on a way back burner.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think it's going to be what people think it is. If at the most it's just going to be a new age. The new age can mean anything. Yeah. But
I guess we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait and see, huh?
Yeah, I think it's just going to be the next day. It's going to be 2013, but but or the next year. But I have a feeling like, because the past 10 years, ever since the Phoenix Lights, there just hasn't been much. There's been the O'Hare Airport incident, Stevensville, Texas, I believe there was something out there, but I believe that, I don't know why, but I just think that there's going to be more UFO sightings coming in the near future, because if extraterrestrials are visiting Earth, like I believe some say that we're on quarantine and they're just kind of stopped showing themselves for a little while, just like they did in the early part of the 20th century.
Yeah. Well, they probably have more to fear from us than we from them, because we're pretty warlike.
Yes,
ourselves. Exactly. Shoot first, ask questions later.
That's why I think that we will, as the years go by, probably the next 10 years, we will probably see more UFO sightings, because it just seems like, there's wars left and right now, so what do you think? Do you think we'll see more UFO sightings within the next 10 years?
Well, perhaps so. I know they're interested in our wars, like you say. I was in Iraq till 2005, and I remember we were flying back from northern Iraq into Balad, where I was stationed, and this was late at night, about 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock, and I saw a light where no light should have been. There was a no-fly zone, so there's certainly no civilian aircraft out there, but there's a light just streaming along the ground, at least a bit up off the surface, heading up towards Turkey. And our crew didn't know what this was, and I didn't know what it was either. But it's just a light in the sky, but it was where it should not have been.
Yeah.
Because we had night vision goggles.
Well, oh, yeah, night vision goggles?
Yeah.
Sweet. What was it? Did it seem to pulsate, or was it moving like a little bit, or?
Yeah, it was moving. Of course, it was heading from south to north into Turkey, and there was just a light skimming along the surface, and it was not an aircraft. And it wasn't ours, because we flew darked out, just only infrared landing lights and things like that. So you had to use night vision goggles to even see our helicopters.
Could it have been a satellite?
No, it's too low. Also not the right. It was not the right time of day or night, rather, because the sun had been set for many hours by that time.
A lot of soldiers, because I have a lot of friends that's been over there. A lot of them say that there have been, since the Iraq and Afghanistan war, there have been lots of weird things that's happened over there in the skies. A lot of because I talk, and I mention stuff about UFOs and stuff, and a lot of them say that they have seen unexplainable craft that they had no idea what it was.
Yeah, well, I saw an unexplainable light there, so obviously, at least I think they're interested in what's happening, because, we're very warlike, and I guess they want to see how our civilization is progressing, and I don't know, it's kind of a mixed bag there.
And, if it gets worse, I do think that they will intervene. Hopefully they won't intervene on that kind of level. Hopefully they'll just intervene, just for the heck of it. But I wouldn't like, for them just to be our saving force. I'd rather be, we need to be our own saving force. But, Go ahead, sir.
Well, my opinion is that they really have no interest in whether we survive or not. I think they're just observers, and just curious to see what happens to a very warlike civilization like ours.
Yeah.
And they're, it's like we wouldn't have any interest in an anthill that much. You see the ants fighting themselves, but they're observers.
Yeah, I like the way you put that. Do you think that these UFOs are do you think that these are the same UFOs that we see? The cigar shape, the oval, the light, just like you've seen. And do you think that these are the same UFOs that people in ancient history have seen? Because there have been many paintings on walls and many stories. Even in the Bible, they call it the chariots of the God. Do you think it's the same UFOs?
Well, I think there's more than one civilization out there. There's probably myriads of very advanced civilizations, and they all have their own designs for their spacecraft, and so it may not, again, I think we're under a spyglass from a lot of different civilizations and different type of craft.
Many say that, how can they travel here? Because, and over such vast distances. And I always tell people, it's not, you have to think outside the box. You have to think outside of our normal realm, because just imagine, well, what I normally say is, do you believe in other life out there in the universe? And most people say yes, Nowadays, most people say, yeah, they believe that there's possible that there could be life out there. And then I normally say, what if that life has been, let's say 100,000 or even 1,000,000 years more advanced than more years ahead of us in technology,
Oh, yeah.
It will make it possible for them to travel here.
Oh, yeah. Well, the skeptic's favorite argument is because we couldn't do it, they couldn't do it either. And boy, they were fallacious. Given a couple 100 years, no telling what we'll be doing.
And just because you can't see an ultraviolet light, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it don't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
I have 4 minutes left with you, but give me a brief synopsis of what you believe these black triangles are that's been seen for the past couple decades.
Well, I think it's an extraterrestrial craft of a different design. They don't always have to be a saucer or an oblong craft, but triangular craft would be in there too. So I think it's just maybe from a different civilization.